Welcome to UW Sounds of the World, a sampler of films from the Robert Garfias collection in the University of Washington Ethnomusicology Archives. I'm Laurel Sercombe. During the 1960s and 70s, Dr. Garfias filmed hundreds of musicians during field trips abroad, as well as right here on campus. Today, we're going to see several performances of Hindustani classical music by Zia Mohiuddin Dagar, master of the rudra vina. My guest is Jeff Lewis, a student of Z.M. Dagar for over 10 years and a prominent teacher of Indian music. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Laura.
Would you give us a brief introduction to Hindustani music and also to the Drupad tradition?
Sure, it'd be my pleasure. Hindustani music is the classical music tradition of North India, and Drupad is the oldest existing form of that classical music, from which all the other forms of classical music were derived. For instance, Khyal and Tumri, which other people who are perhaps familiar with Indian music may be familiar with those terms. Drupad being the oldest existing tradition, it is a classical tradition, therefore it has a theory base behind it, as classical traditions do. In this case, it is rag-based, which means that it is a formulation of notes to make particular mood, to make this rag. Indian music being melodic and not harmonic, so we are talking about the relations of the notes to each other to form this mood. They can be for times of the day, seasons of the year, or different types of moods that the human being happens to go through. The analogy that I like to use to describe what a rag is I have this analogy of a solar system, where the rag is made up of different planets, and within the planets represent the different notes that revolve around the sun, which is the base note of that rag, having different weights and different positions, and it's kind of like a big cosmic juggling act where you have to balance all of these positions to keep this thing going to maintain that particular mood. Besides being a classical art form, it is totally improvised, though, upon a strict structure, which means it is not written except for the compositions. So the rag in the exposition of it starts with just showing these notes and how they relate to each other in just pure form, introducing a pulse, and it's not until after all that happens that we introduce the composition, which are memorized, those are structured, but you improvise off those in a form that is called tal, which we do not have in Western music. And tal is a rhythm cycle. They can be in any amount of beats, 3, 5, 7, 9, 10, whatever. But once you start that composition in that amount of beats, you improvise off of it and you continue on, and you're coming back in as if you had been continuing all along. So you have to keep track of where you are in all of this.
Well, tell us something about your teacher, Z.M. Dagar, and about his instrument, the rudra vina.
Z.M. Dagar was 19th generation musician. He was a very prominent rudra vina player. Now let me explain what the rudra vina is. The rudra vina is a stick zither. The stick zither being an instrument with a bridge on a stick that is amplified by 2 gourds. It is plucked and it has frets. The traditional vina was made out of bamboo with the frets set in wax, which anybody who's familiar with India and how the extreme temperatures can be in India, it's not necessarily so practical having instruments set in wax, as it can be very hot there and those frets can have a tendency of moving. What Dagar Sahib did was he changed it from bamboo to teak, and then instead of having wax frets, he had those frets tied. So once you have these frets tied, you can actually adjust them for the particular rag because the positions of the notes may be slightly different.
Right.
The other thing was, with the old style of the vina, it used to be held over your shoulder in an upright position with one of your ears against the resonating gourd, which allowed you to hear things that most other people could not hear. Okay. So when Dagar Sahib made it out of the different material, making it out of teak instead of bamboo and enlarged the gourds, he could, one, tune it up higher, put on thicker strings, which then increased the volume, also put larger resonators on it, which enabled him to bring it down into more of a sitting position and made it more of a performing instrument as opposed to just a meditative classical instrument.
Okay.
The vina also is considered the top of the hierarchy in terms of Indian instruments, and vina players were held in very high regard. And Dagar Sahib was one of the few existing vina players of his time who was a great exponent and is largely responsible for the continuation of this by the propagation of this music on the vina.
Great. Well, let's see some footage.
Sure, that'd be great.
First, we're going to see Z.M. Dagar in a performance of Rag Todi. This was filmed by Dr. Garfius in 1976. It's a short performance of Rag Todi. That was Z.M. Dagar performing a short version of Rag Todi. Jeff, did you want to say anything about that particular performance?
Sure, I'd love to. Actually, that's the quintessential example of how a rag can be distilled down into a very short period of time, because any one of those portions could have been extemporized and developed to a much greater extent, which we're about to see a little bit later on. The other thing I would like to say is that this is a good example of a classic recording where the musician knows in advance that he's going to be doing it. He has a set amount of time, and this is what he's going to be doing for you during that period of time.
Right.
The other quick thing I'd like to say about rag todi is, besides being a morning rag, probably to the Western uninitiated ear, this is probably the most exotic scale for a rag to the Western ear. Whereas the next example that we're about to hear, which is going to be an evening rag, is a little less exotic.
Right. Well, would you go ahead and introduce then this next performance we're going to see several sections of?
Sure. This next performance is from a live performance as opposed to just a studio recording, where the time limitations are strictly up to the artist's potential. And even though you're going to see 3 different clips from that recording, all 3 clips together are only coming from just the introductory portion of what the rag is. This is just short little clips from those things. So it shows you how this music, being extemporaneous, can just continue to develop up to the artist's discretion, the situation where you're in to do the performing of it, and what the audience can absorb. So I'm looking forward to seeing that again.
Okay. So now we're going to see 3 excerpts from Z.M. Dagar's performance of rag yaman, recorded by the University of Washington Ethnomusicology Archives in 1986. And you'll know it's a live performance because there's a lot of coughing. It was March. Yeah. That was Z.M. Dagar performing portions of Rag Yaman in 1986 here at the University of Washington. Did you want to comment about that performance or about Z.M. Dagar?
Well, I really would like to say something about Z.M. Dagar because he really was a unique musician in that not only was he the holder of a great and ancient tradition, but he gave very freely from that tradition, whereas a lot of musicians can be very proprietary and secretive about the music that they have, and Dagar Sahib was really very giving. And he realized that if he did not give out this information in this music, that there was a good chance that that music would die. And he was very, very free and giving, and I feel very honored to have studied from him and be a recipient of that. Yeah. And to have all of that stored here in the University of Washington archives is a great treasure and a great gift.
Yeah. That's all we have time for today. Jeff, thanks so much for joining me to share the music of Z.M. Dagar. This wonderful musician is no longer with us, but thanks to the film footage produced by Robert Garfius and Fred Lieberman and the video recording by the University of Washington Ethnomusicology Archives, we can continue to enjoy his music. I'm Laurel Sercombe, and this is UW Sounds of the World.